Welcome to the Limitless Entrepreneur Podcast, your weekly dose of strategies and mindset tools to build a business in alignment with your purpose and get you playing a bigger game. I'm your host, Nicole Lano. Hello and welcome to the Limitless Entrepreneur Podcast, everyone. I'm your host, Nicole Lano, and we're here together to talk about a tool that I use that I think is truly transformative. I think that it from the work that I've done with myself, and then of course the work that I've done with my clients, this holds a lot of the keys to how do we grow really fast? How do we accelerate that inner growth? How do we make that move faster? And it pairs so beautifully with human design because it is kind of like a sister cousin program of the human design system, but I use them differently. I use them for different things, and they really, the two of them together, hold the keys to very, very fast transformation. Really dive deep into not just what holds us back, but what's the potential that's really there for us. And I think where, if you've been confused by human design, if you've found yourself getting into the mechanics of it, you're following strategy and authority, sort of, but maybe you're a little bit intoxicated by some of those gates. What do they mean? What's my purpose? And all of that. This system can shed some light on that and sort of open up those doors for you. And I find that while strategy and authority is the first thing that everybody should be doing, and I don't like people to dive too deep into all of the other details necessarily right away, because it can be a bit of a distraction. It's fine if you do it. You can dive in and you can go whole hog on all of it and learn all about your gates and all of that stuff, as long as you're following your strategy and your authority. If you're not using it, then devouring all of that information is actually not going to get you what you want. You're going to stunt your growth there. So that's the caveat that I give everybody. Go all in if you want, as long as you're following your strategy and authority. So the same thing is true with this system that I'm going to share with you. So the system that we're talking about that pairs so well with human design, that can help open up the deeper meaning in your design. I really use this for purpose. I really use this to dive into some key elements of your chart to unlock who you are and your deep potential that's sitting there under the surface. If you feel like you're an untapped well, then the Gene Keys is the system we're talking about. The Gene Keys holds the keys for you because it really does unlock things. So why do I use the Gene Keys? I'm kind of explaining a little bit of that, but what I use it for is, and I'll explain what the Gene Keys are. If you're not familiar with it, a lot of people buy the Gene Keys book and they're really confused because they buy the book and they're like, what do I do with this? Or you go to the website and there's all these sequences and stuff and you're like, what do I do with this? What do I don't understand it. And very similar to human design, where there's information up there, but people fall short, where it falls flat because they dive in and they're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to use this. I'm fascinated by it. I'm intrigued by it. I want to learn more. I want to do what I can with this so that I can realize my potential and I can live more in alignment. But it's foggy as to like, what's the process here that I'm following? What am I actually doing with everything that I'm learning here? What am I doing with all of this information? So that's where someone like me comes in. As a coach, I can help guide you to the things that are important for you to learn right away and how to dive into all of this. I am a Gene Keys guide as well as a human design coach. So I've gone through the whole Gene Keys journey, and it truly did unlock so many things, that some things I didn't know that were there, and some things that I knew were there and I could never quite touch. It brought certain energies and qualities that I see or I experienced in myself into a very specific light. And every day there's some new revelation, and it really comes from the Gene Keys. It comes from that in-depth work, and I use them in tandem. I use human design with the Gene Keys. I don't do one or the other. I do both because I think that they support each other really, really well. So, what are the gene keys? The gene keys were created by a man named Richard Rudd, and Richard Rudd was a human design teacher. Like, he was deep in the human design world. I believe he worked with Ra, and who was the founder of human design. And he spun this off into this other system. The way I look at gene keys is and human design is that human design is like the masculine process. It's like more the masculine energy of this energetic work. It's the strategy. It is the here's what you do. This comes into your world. Here's how you decide whether it's right for you. It's the if this, then that framework. If this happens, then do this. If that happens, don't do this. That's what human design is telling you. It's giving you these parameters, and it's giving you a structure to follow, which can be really helpful because some of the energy work can be so out there and esoteric, and it leave you saying like, I don't know what to do with this. And it's why it can take years and years and years and years and years, because we're just like talking about things. But human design gives you something to do. It says, here's your strategy. Here's your authority. Here's the ways that you might be getting sucked into a negative pattern. Here's the energy that you're meant to put out. So here's where you might be repressed or you might be overreactive in. It gives you this beautiful way to break down. It gives you a framework for how to live in alignment. Super supportive, really, really helpful. It's why I recommend starting with human design and getting your feet wet with your strategy and your authority. But when we're diving deeper and when we're looking to really transform, then the gene keys to me give us that they are the feminine side of the same process, that same journey of self discovery that we are on, but self discovery for the purpose of knowing who we are, but being able to be all that we are, not just operate correctly, which is human design gives us a lot of that. The gene keys really start to, you dig into like, this is who I am. This is my essence. These are the key energies in my chart. These are the ones I should focus on. These are the areas I should focus on first. This is how this might show up for me. We get a little bit more specific with, and it's really based on the gates in your human design chart. So it's based on specific gates that Richard Rudd had put into sequences. Now, there are 3 sequences in the gene keys. There's the activation sequence, there is the Venus sequence, and then there's the Pearl sequence. The activation sequence is kind of the first one that you start with. And the activation sequence kind of takes you through your incarnation cross. It takes you through your purpose, and it helps you understand yourself. It's going a bit differently than when we talk about incarnation cross. It's taking you through a journey of understanding the key energies in your chart, like the 70% of your energy. It's taking you through that and takes you on this little journey through it. And that's what someone like me, I help facilitate that journey for you as a Gene Keys guide, where we're not telling you the answers, but we're guiding you and asking important questions for you to unlock the specific gifts that are within you. And what Gene Keys gives you is it gives you for every energy in your chart, it gives you a shadow frequency, which is the low frequency, the gift frequency, and then what we call the city, which is sort of the enlightened frequency. So we have the low frequency, the high frequency. And then when you live in the high frequency, when you're living in the gift long enough, you unlock this other level, this enlightened level of the city. That's where we're all trying to get to. But if you can live in the gift, you're doing really, really well. And it tells you where you might be slipping into shadow and where you might need to focus on the gift a little bit more. And it tells you what those are. So truly, really, really powerful. So the activation sequence takes you through that first set of like, this will have the biggest impact in the shortest period of time because it's most of your energy. This is the really key elements of your chart that if you can get these into the gift, then you'll be doing real well. Okay. And so this is that self-discovery journey of going through these key energies in your chart. And then we have the Venus sequence, which is all about relationships. It's all about, this is the Venus sequence is really about love and about the way that we relate to people and we relate to others and how our energy interacts with others and what our relationships might be like. That's a bit of a longer journey. That's a deep dive. And then we have the pearl sequence. And the pearl sequence is sort of the culmination. This one is about really about money and about business and a little bit more about like what you're here to do. And we take you through, and there's 4 key energies in the pearl sequence that we can take you through, and that one operates a little bit differently. So it's these 3 sequences that if you go through all of them, then you will understand your energy on a very, very deep level. You'll understand the nuances of who you are. And when I talk about, if you've listened to the show for a while, you know that I talk about how I see everything in the human design chart. Every center, every channel, every gate, every single thing in the human design chart, whether it's defined or it's undefined, I see it all as a dial. A dial. We're never getting rid of anything. We're never like ridding ourselves of a bad energy. There's no such thing. It's in you either consistently or sometimes. If it's undefined, it's sometimes there. And if it's defined, it's always there. But the dial tells us is that energy. So I gate 64 that's my conscious sun. That's a dial. Gate 64 is a dial. And gate 64, if that dial is turned down to the low frequency, or in Gene Keys we'd call it the shadow, then I'm going to be pulling a lot of that shadow into my world. I'm going to see that. I'm going to experience that. So I'm never trying to get rid of it. Gate 64 is the gate of confusion. If you're living in the shadow there, you're living in confusion. I can never get rid of confusion. It's consistent for me. It's the most consistent theme in my life. But I understand confusion in a way nobody else does, unless you have the same gate and you've had similar experiences to me. I have done a lot of work around this gate, and I've done a lot of work to turn that dial up into the gift frequency, which is imagination. And every shadow contains a gift is the kind of the mantra of the Gene Keys. Every shadow contains a gift. I'm never getting rid of confusion. I used to hate confusion. I used to get really frustrated by confusion. Can I learn to love it? Can I learn to look at it differently? Can I learn to see it as something different? Because it is part of my magic. And just that concept alone, think about that. Think about how powerful this is. So for me to know that my conscious sun, which is the biggest energy in my chart, to know that confusion is the low frequency of that, and that confusion is something I've battled my whole life. Of course I have, because it's the biggest energy in my chart and it's the shadow frequency. So I've just been living in the low. I've been living in the low expression of it. I've been experiencing the low expression and learning how to not fight it, not hate it, not wish it away, because that's a fool's errand. That's never going to happen. But can I access the gift that's in the confusion, which is imagination? And if I can, and if I can live in imagination long enough, then I can get into the Siddhic state, which is illumination. Then I can go into the city. Then I can hang there. And this is a really powerful gate. It's a crazy one. It's a head center gate. So I have the ability, if I'm in the gift of who I am, I have the ability to change the way that people think. It's part of what I'm here to do. And me knowing that has helped to change my business and helped to change the way that I show up and what I do and how I do it and how I conduct myself and my business. I have developed a power around that, rather than the way that it felt for me a lot of my life, like a hindrance, like something that was out of control for me, and something that was not a strength, because I was confused a lot. So the work for me was learning how to work with that shadow and how to enter the gift. And it was the Gene Keys that opened that up for me. So this is how I go in. This is how we go in surgically. So rather than doing mindset work where we are doing a complete overhaul on your personality, on the way that you're behaving, and we're taking notes on, like, let me talk about your actions and let's make a model of this and how we break it all down of what your behavior is. With this process, we can look at it from an energetic standpoint. And even by having the conversations and contemplating, because this is a huge part of what the Gene Keys does, it tells you to contemplate. Now, with mindset work, you're contemplating a lot, but it's a very mental process. You're thinking about things. With contemplation, it's a much more, it's somewhere between meditation and thought. There's a soft focus, a gentle touch to the way that you're thinking about things. And what actually happens in this process, working with the Gene Keys, is I look at it like, I mean, the first sequence is called the activation sequence, and I think that he named it beautifully, because all of the Gene Keys, all of this is an activation of sorts. We are opening up, we're planting a seed. We're digging the hole, we're putting a seed in the ground with these thoughts. Even this podcast right now, me talking to you about this, there's a seed that's been planted. And then contemplation, the gentle focus, the gentle thought around it that you're putting on it, is like water and sunlight. And this is how something new begins to grow. Maybe where nothing would grow before, or where weeds were growing before, and now something beautiful has a chance because we put something new in the ground. And that's what we do with the Gene Keys. We are planting new seeds and we are opening it up. And contemplation is that light. Contemplation is that water. It's the fresh air, nurturing you from the inside. And human design is the mechanical process telling you what to do when something happens, how to interact with the outside world, how to operate. And it's this beautiful marriage when you have the two of them working together. So that's why it's part of my process. And I encourage you that if you've bought the Gene Keys book and you've been confused, well, then there's a reason for that, because it's not really meant to be a standalone book, but you can read about the gates in your chart. You can read about the gates in your chart, and you'll get Richard Rudd's contemplations on those gates. They will be different than what you read if you look up the human design gates, if you look up if you have any of the books, or if you look up the gates on in the human design, for the human design school, the definitions that Ra gave, they're very different to very different people, their interpretations of these gates. Ra's interpretations are very closely, they're both aligned with the Chinese I Ching. This is where it all gets sourced from. Every gate in the chart originally came from the Chinese I Ching. That's where we get that. And that is the system that gives us all of those numbers on the chart and the meanings behind them. It's an ancient system from China, the Chinese I Ching. And they're all derivative of that. But you'll notice that Richard Rudd's are very in depth. You'll get a lot of his thoughts around it. Can be a little flowery at times. He speaks very poetically. Some people find it very confusing. I personally have to listen to them many times. But it's also, these aren't meant for you, these gates aren't meant for you to just read what someone else said and then take that and then that's the letter of the law. You take in that information and then you ask the very important question, the most important question, which is, what does this mean to me? How does this show up in my life? And that can take time. That can take a little bit of time to open up. And I get new drop-ins of what these things mean to me every day. I've been deep in my contemplation on all of those, on every gate in the sequences in my chart. And something new is is brought to me every day. There's a new level of drop-in. There's a new level of understanding. There's a new way and perspective for me to look at it through. And that's very powerful. The level that I know myself and what I've seen with my clients too, it helps us understand our key shadow patterns. That's one of the things that I work with it really closely. This is your shadow pattern, and this is, you want to pay attention to when you're in it. And we specifically work on how you get out of it. How do you shift from the shadow into the gift? And we get you doing that on very key energies in the chart. And I show you how they work off of each other as well, because they're not just standalone. My gate 64 is playing off my gate 63. And they have this little ping pong match of their energy. And me knowing that, me understanding that, what it looks like when that goes into shadow, I can quickly shift into the gift. And that's how I change my life. And that's what I work with my people to do as well. So I hope that this sheds some light on what the gene keys are. I know there's a lot of talk about it. You might hear them spoken about synonymously, where human design and the gene keys. Many of us who are human design coaches are also gene keys guides, or have at least dabbled in the world of gene keys, because it's so valuable, because it's really groundbreaking, and it's something that it moved my journey much faster. And I know that it has for many of my clients as well, and certainly many of my friends in the community as well. So I hope that this sheds some light on how you can use it, what it is. I hope it's inspired you to maybe dive into your gene keys and your sequences. If you're looking for help with that, you can certainly reach out to me. I'm at Nicole Leno Official on Instagram. You can send me a DM over there, or you can take a look at our offerings on the website. Or you can book a human design reading with me, where we can talk about some of it. Foundational readings, we go into some of the basics of your chart, but we could talk about other ways that we could dive into these deeper aspects as well. If you're interested in having a little human design mini session here on this show, you can have a mini reading or a mini coaching session where we dive into your chart. All you have to do, we're running a contest right now, and all you have to do is leave a review on iTunes for this show. Tell everybody what you love about the show and why you love it. And then take a little screenshot of that review, share it in your Instagram stories, and tag me, Nicole, at Nicole Leno Official. And that will be your entry. That's all you have to do. Super simple, really, really simple. And you get to tell everybody what you love about this show. How everybody wins. So we'll pull down that screenshot, and that will be your entry. And then my team will reach out to you if you are a lucky winner, and you get to come on the show. You get to be a guest on the podcast, and you get to have a little free reading for yourself. Everybody wins, and I get to win, because that's like one of my favorite things to do, is to dive into people's charts with them. So I would love to have you on. I would love to dive into your chart with you and hear about what's happening with you, and give you some insight into what makes you tick, how you can adjust something in your life or your business to see real change that you're looking for. I hope that I get to see you here. We also have 2 free guides that are available for you. We have a deconditioning guide, a human design deconditioning guide, and a human design productivity guide, or as I like to call it, flowductivity, because it's not about doing more for the sake of doing more. It's about doing more while working less, getting more done while actually honoring yourself and your design. You can find the deconditioning guide at nicoleleno.me/decondition. And then you can find the productivity guide at nicoleleno.me/productivity. I hope that you enjoy those. I hope you download those. I'd love to know what you think about them. Please join the contest so that you can come on the show. I can meet you and we can dive into your design. And remember, you're only limited by the limitations that you accept. And when you stop accepting those limitations, that is when you become limitless. So go out there and be limitless, everyone. I'll see you in the next episode. If you loved this episode, please leave us a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this podcast. And if you want to stay in touch with us, we would love to have you as a part of our Facebook community, Practical Manifestors. It's a community for process-driven women looking for clear and actionable steps to embodying a life of wealth and alignment. Join us at Practical Manifestors in Facebook, or go to www.innerceogroup.com.